Today I'm talking to Gary Warner. Gary Warner is a former educator and a threat intelligence professional who is pretty much the most knowledgeable person there is on Chinese-speaking smishing triads who have recently moved from automating phishing and smishing to being very good at money laundering. I'm very happy that Gary agreed to be my guest today in a new episode of Fusion Fireside. My name is Ewart Driehuis. Gary, last year I met you at RSA and I was very surprised when you opened your laptop for me and you gave me some insight into a wealth of information surrounding the Chinese-speaking smishing triads. I was invigorated and very interested to have a conversation with you. So my first question really is all about how did you collect all of that information? How did you do that?
Sure. So one of the things that we've been focused on for years in my lab at the academic university, but also since I've left academia, is where are criminals having conversations? And how can we learn from the criminals? In earlier parts of my career, I was focused on the IOCs, what IP address, what hash, what, all of these.
Yeah.
And what I came to realize is there's someone sitting across the chessboard, and we need to learn about the person and the people, not just the indicators of compromise. And so we started building tooling that would allow us to go and find resources like that and collect them at scale. So the observations in Chinese Telegram really came from that process. Find a Telegram channel and then find the other channels that had a large audience overlap with those channels. And that process, I call it building a similar channel tree, works for any topic. So we can take, in the US, we have a problem with white supremacy. We take a white supremacy channel and say, find the similar channels, and then iterate. Find all the channels similar to those. Then find all the channels similar to those. And that's the process, whether it's a phishing group, whether it's a Chinese organized crime group, whether it's ISIS and Al-Qaeda back in the day, is find the conversations and then find where else those same people are talking. And that's really where we build our collections from.
So that's interesting. So the platforms that the criminals are communicating on are actually a source of information for yourself as well.
That's right. Yeah. And in this case, we know there are also Chinese crime chats happening on WeChat and places like that. But we found that there was enough of it on Telegram that really became our primary focus in this situation.
Yeah. So I think that's very interesting because Telegram specifically in the last few, let's say, months or maybe even year, has seen a tremendous uptick in all kinds of social engineering automation, right?
That's right.
As recently as I think just 2 weeks ago, you released a blog about how they're automating, leveraging these platforms to create groups. Can you tell a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So in these channels, the type of channel where we're looking at this particular criminal activity, they call them guarantee syndicates. And a guarantee syndicate is a central controlling group for a marketplace. And they will invite vendors to link themselves to this guarantee. When they do that, the vendor has to provide a deposit to the guarantee syndicate. And then the syndicate says, we accept you as an authorized vendor. And if someone has a bad financial experience with you, we will refund the amount that they've lost to you up to the amount of your deposit. All right. So each of these different guarantee syndicates has a menu of what vendor categories do they provide. And the one you're referring to, we found a syndicate that had a very active sub-menu, if you will, of people who are building chat rooms for inviting people into investment scams primarily. So the idea is that whether that's a WhatsApp group or a Telegram group, they will create a channel and they will fill it full of appropriate potential victims. And then once the channel is designed, they'll turn it over to you to engage with the audience that they've built for you.
Yeah. So that's a pretty big thing, isn't it? Because investment scams, I reckon it's the most abundant scam worldwide. And we're now seeing some very prolific actor groups actively automating these MOs. So that doesn't bode well, does it?
Yeah, that's right. So in the US, we measure such crimes with two government reports. One is from the Internet Crime and Complaint Center, which is run by the FBI. And the other one is called Consumer Sentinel, and that one is run by the Federal Trade Commission. We believe that all of Europe has similar statistics and ratios, but for investment scams in particular, it became the number one source of financial loss as reported to those two entities in 2022. In 2023, it went up by more than 50%, and then in 2024, it doubled. So the reports of investment scams to the FBI went from $2.2 billion to 3.5 and then to 6.6 over those 3 years.
Incredible.
And we believe it'll go up even higher this year.
Yeah.
Those numbers tend to come out in April.
Yeah. And am I right in thinking these are only the reported losses, right? They might be even higher.
So the Federal Trade Commission in late December put out a report about fraud against the elderly. And in that report, they used a few different models, and they said that they believe that frauds that lose less than $1,000, that they're only getting 2% of those reports.
Wow.
And frauds that lose more than $1,000, they believe they're getting 6% of those reports.
Right.
Well, then they applied those numbers from their methodology to the actual reports they'd received and said, while we had originally placed certain fraud levels, we now believe that $139 billion would be the amount of money that's been stolen.
That's incredible. And
139 of that 139 billion, they believe that 81 billion targeted people over the age of 60.
Right. So the senior citizens and the elderly are being hit harder, according to these numbers, than other demographics.
Yeah. So the median loss, it turns out that there are just as many victims for investment scams at younger ages, but the median loss per victim goes up dramatically when you get into the older age ranges. Right. I believe the numbers, and this is off the top of my head, but I think the ratio is correct, that people in their 30s and 40s are losing between $1,000 and $1,500 as their median loss, while people over 60 are losing more than $8,500 for their median loss. So it's 6 times as much per victim when you get into the elderly range. Even though there are just as many people that are victims, the amount of money stolen goes up dramatically when you get to the seniors. We're not going to call them elderly, because of.
Well, exactly. But you're right, but depending on age group, they lose more per incident than others, and this makes sense, right? Because you accumulate wealth over time when you get older.
Right.
So
it also has to do with the targeting, though.
Right.
So I posted what I call a lost in translation joke yesterday. I had a term that keeps being mistranslated in my investigations of the Chinese scam groups. I don't speak Chinese. I rely on machine translation. I recognize, I used to study Japanese poetry, so I recognize a lot of kanji characters as being the same characters in Chinese, but I don't speak Chinese. what we found was that there was a term that was being translated as powder dealers. And our sense was that powder dealers, maybe they're talking about cocaine or meth. No, the word powder actually was slang for data or for leads. And so they're talking about data brokers. So when they say powder broker or powder vendor or broker, they meant data broker. So data is usually shuzhu in Chinese, but here they were using a different term entirely. Well, as we looked at the categories of leads, there are data brokers who are one of the vendor categories in these guarantee syndicates who are doing things like selling old age leads or selling doctors and lawyers as categories. You can send your scam only to doctors and lawyers if that's what you prefer. They had another one for people who are homeowners, and then you can cross those. So I want elderly people who are homeowners, which makes it more likely that they have funds that they could invest.
That's so interesting. So beforehand, before they even start their attacks, they have gathered data, and through the reconnaissance, if you will, they can actually make targeted campaigns and specifically target very specific demographics, like a LinkedIn ad campaign, if you will. That's incredible.
Well, and it even gets beyond that. So a new category that we began seeing was, one translation of it would be number surveillance. And the idea is that before people send out these toll road fish and the package delivery fish, it turns out that certain telecom vendors are being extremely proactive against killing all of their numbers. And one of the techniques is to avoid that particular telecom vendor. And I know who it is, and I've spoken to them about what they're doing, but I'm not at liberty to reveal that. But the criminals are particularly saying, we can screen the numbers prior to you sending your SMS to ensure what type of people own these numbers. And so you can ask them to give you a list of people who have Facebook accounts and whose telephone vendor is, we'll make one up, BT, if we're in the UK, for instance. So I want BT customers who have Facebook accounts and have LinkedIn accounts. And they will build you a data set of numbers to send your spam to that is this telecom provider with these social media accounts. And then you can do even more specific targeting as well. But the idea in this case is they know a particular telecom vendor is being very proactive about blocking their messages and actually destroying the sending path that they're using. And so they're making sure that they don't send the spam to customers of that telecom vendor.
Wow. And so there's a lot to unpack there. So the granularity with which they work is amazing. But also one of the takeaways here is that telcos actually have a great capability to disrupt or even prevent the early stages in the attack chain. So
right.
That's amazing. And that might be also a reason why a lot of fraud practitioners are talking to telcos to see what they can do together.
Yeah. I think as we look at the different categories of fraud in these guarantee syndicates, we're learning a lot about what they're focusing on. So you and I worked on a project a while back with the Wall Street Journal where we were talking about the other end of it. What happens after you have your numbers stolen? Do you want to maybe introduce that project for your listeners, and then we'll talk about that category of vendors?
Yeah, well, that was very cool because it was really about the cash outs, wasn't it? It was that part of the process, and they used the NFC relays in order to intercept the NFC signal at the payment terminal and transfer it over a proxy to another part of the world. And you and I were able to actually demonstrate both ends. You the start end, and we demonstrated the back end of that, and did the actual NFC relay as a cash out method that places the head honcho out of harm's way, because he's not the person standing next to the POS device when the fraud happens. Right. Yeah, you're talking
so
about that.
That is one of the categories. That is one of the largest categories in certain of these guarantee syndicates, is people who run cash out rings. And so the idea is that you may buy from several different vendors, or you may buy a package of services. So for example, in the phishing, I may say, I need someone to build some phishing sites for me. And I'm going to run the server. I'm going to send the spam. I just need the phishing sites built. And in that case, I might rent from a particular provider of the phishing service. The famous one that you'll recall is the Lighthouse Phishing Group, which was attacked by Google very successfully recently. But those phishing kits, if you will, instead of buying a particular brand's phishing kit, what they're offering is as many as 300 or 400 different phishing templates. And they're using the Docker images. So I can check out a Docker image onto my web server, and then it comes pre-populated with as many of those phishing templates as I'd like to use. And so I just create my domain name, and I check out a Docker image to load my phish. Well, I could then hire a different vendor to send the spam for me. And those vendors, the famous one you may remember from the mnemonic guys up in Norway, we called him Little Gray Cat. And Little Gray Cat was operating a machine room, is the term they use. And so a machine room has racks of phones that are all wired up to a central console. And from the central console, they give the command, what SMS message should you send, and what list of telephone numbers should you send it to. But most of them are not using SMS. They're using iMessage, or they're using RCS for the Android recipients.
Yep.
Rich Communication System is the Android end-to-end encrypted. And part of that end-to-end encryption, both on iMessage and RCS, the telecom vendor can't see the message.
Yeah.
It's end-to-end encrypted. So if you have a telecom vendor, they're not able to intercept the message based on its contents.
Yeah.
They might get it from other ways, but they don't see the contents.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And those images...
So now we bought a phish, we bought a spam system to send the messages for us. Now the credit cards are harvested, and now we can take our credit cards and we can engage with a cash out group to go shopping with the credit cards that we've stolen.
Yep.
And so now that's where the NFC remote tap came in. It may be your team that called it ghost tap first.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that was us.
Yeah, I think you coined that term. Yeah, ghost tap. So the Threat Fabric guys call this remote NFC tap, ghost tap, which I love the term. But now those same crews are driving all around North America, all around Europe, picking up packages by purchasing electronics, purchasing luxury handbags or luxury clothing. And then there's a resale market where either they're going to put those in shipping containers and send them back to Asia, or they're going to sell those online and then convert the proceeds out to crypto and send the crypto back.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. You're absolutely 100% right. And those images you mentioned about the stacks and stacks of mobile phones with painter tape on top of them with Chinese markings to mention what role they played. They made a huge impression indeed. Yeah. So all of this, Gary, is how important is it that that the Chinese-speaking underground, apparently being very good at automating parts of the criminal supply chain, that they are now entering the business of fraud and scams. Whereas in the past, the life was simple. You had the Russian-speaking underground, you had the social engineering underground out of Africa and so on, and then you had the underground out of Southeast Asia. But now this is happening. How big is that of a disruption, according to you?
Well, I think a key piece of it is that they have discovered the weaknesses in our banking systems and discovered the weaknesses in our crypto systems and have very robust means of money laundering. And so that money laundering service is one of the places where all of the world's criminals are intersecting now. We're seeing Russian speakers with Russian telephone numbers in these Chinese Telegram groups buying money laundering services. We're seeing Spanish speakers from Mexico in these groups. We're seeing South Africans, Nigerians living in South Africa in many cases, who are engaging with these money laundering groups. So whether you're doing romance scams and business email compromise in the West African model, you're going to have money that comes in. How do we clean that money and get it to ourselves safely?
Yeah.
And the Chinese model is working so well in there. We have dozens of cases in the US now where the Chinese money laundering model is being used to cash out the drug sales proceeds from the Sinaloa cartel and the cartel Jalisco Nueva Generacion. So CJNG and Sinaloa are both using Chinese money laundering networks to cash their funds out.
Wow. So let's say the regular criminals are using the same money laundering networks, is what you're saying.
Yeah. They have captured the market on money laundering in a way that we've never seen before.
Yeah. And these guys, I imagine, have very high standards with regards to untraceability of the laundered money. So that must be proof and point that they are good at what they are doing, the launderers.
Well, I think so. Here, in the old days, if I wanted to launder money for a drug cartel, I may be able to charge between 30 and 50% for my money laundering services. The Chinese are charging between 3 and 6% for the same services. So part of it is that they're accepting a much lower commission for providing those same services. And then the other part is that they have reduced the size. So now instead of having 5 guys who move $10 million a month each through a corrupt bank in Miami, now they have 4,000 people who are moving a few $100s per day.
Wow.
And so there's this diversification, and they used to refer to these as ant armies. Sometimes we've also seen the term brick movers. And so the idea, when I was traveling in India once, I saw a bunch of people descending on this building, and they're all running away holding a brick in each hand. And I asked my driver, who was giving us a tour, what's going on there? And like, well, that building has been abandoned. The owner is no longer around. And so they're taking the bricks to build a building somewhere else.
Wow.
But they weren't coming in with a truck. They were moving. Each person was going and grabbing a brick in each hand and then running to where they were building the other building. That's kind of the money laundering model here. We have a mountain of gold over here, and we want the mountain of gold over here, and we've paid thousands of people to go each take a handful of gold in each hand and move it through the money laundering process. Well, now they tend to call these motorcades, a motorcade being a parade of cars. And so the motorcade, now they'll talk about people who run fleets or motorcades. Well, this is a vendor who has recruited his own network of smaller money launderers. And we start seeing these show up now where they're doing bank account rentals. So people in India are renting their bank account to Chinese gaming companies, and they're being paid a commission for each deposit that they allow to go through their bank account. We see the same thing heavily in New Zealand right now as well.
Yeah.
Bank account rental ads on Facebook.
Yeah.
But they don't understand that when they're renting their bank account, they've just become one of those little cars in the motorcade that's being run by a Chinese organized crime money laundering network.
Wow, that's incredible, Gary. It's wonderful that you have that kind of visibility, but also you are one of the people that can talk about this stuff so eloquently. So you uncover that world for us fraud practitioners. But to me, it seems like who's going to stop them? No one is, right? This is just the beginning, maybe.
Yeah. So part of this whole thing goes back then to the scam compounds, which is a piece, they're related, right? The guarantee syndicates, some of them are also selling the service of creating those crypto investment scam websites. But the labor behind that is people who have come in through human trafficking.
Yep.
And are enslaved in compounds in Cambodia and Myanmar and Laos. And now we're seeing that model spread. We're trying to determine what it means. But I talked about being able to build out those Telegram similar channel trees. I have a similar channel tree for Chinese language. I call them HR groups, human resources. They're posting the job ads, but there are also people asking to join these compounds, some of them expressing that they have skill sets here, where they'll say, I specialize in romance and quick kill. Quick kill is the term that they use for cashing out the crypto investment scam. So you'll see people, and are they human trafficking victims? They're advertising that they're a specialist in criminal activity, but then when they get hired thinking they're taking a job in Thailand, they get smuggled across the border in Myanmar, and now they're being beaten with pipes. And, well, yes, even though they went intentionally joining a criminal group, they're not receiving the pay they were promised, and they're being tortured.
Yeah.
But now we're seeing those same HR channels offering jobs in Georgia and Armenia and Sri Lanka. And what started off just in Myanmar and Cambodia is now spreading, and Laos is now spreading all around the world. And that's a very troubling new trend that we're seeing.
Yeah. There's again a lot to unpack. So the line between victim and criminal is blurring, with the human trafficking. But it's not as black and white as just everyone is human trafficked. Some of them are having a criminal career, and some of them are somewhere in the gray area.
Yeah.
So I think the one takeaway is, in the past, when we got a scam message on WhatsApp, we would try and mess around, with the criminal. But you never know. It might be someone who's being beaten with a pipe, as you say. So that might not be the most, human thing to do anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. So much. How do we stop it?
Yeah.
I have to say that everyone said when the U.S. puts out an indictment or a sanction against a criminal warlord in Southeast Asia, that won't do anything. But then we're seeing it does. Yeah. So with the sanctions against the Prince Group and their leader, Chen Zhe, he was arrested. He was sent back to China. Billions of dollars in crypto were seized from him, but also billions of dollars in real estate and luxury vehicles and super yachts have all been seized. And now when you visit Cambodia, as my friend Erin West just did from Operation Shamrock, she's saying these are ghost towns. Yeah. Some of the places that used to be filled with scammers, the doors are open and the rooms are empty, and they were evacuated from there. Well, have they been moved Is this just security theater? That's what we thought at the beginning. This is just security theater. Cambodia is making a little show about shutting down the scams because they can't stop it because the ruling elite is so deeply entrenched in profiting from these scams. How could they possibly make it go away?
Yeah.
We don't know yet what the end is happening there, but it has had an impact. The scams are moving, they're scam compounds, and Cambodia is claiming that they're continuing this crackdown. They've identified over 21,000 foreign workers and are sending them out of the country. It's changing. It's squeezing the balloon. It's going to come up somewhere else, right? But it all of those changes started with sanctions from the U.S. And the U.K. and other countries joined as well. But I think we can make an impact, but we have to be willing to identify and name the entities that are profiting from this.
Exactly. Well, and sleuthing Telegram channels and other channels like you do is a fantastic start in identifying who's behind this. And I'm sure that law enforcement, well, their role, of course, is never to stop the problem. Their role is always to introduce risk for the criminals, right? Is there warrant risk for doing criminal behavior? Everyone would do it. So upping the risk is all we can do, isn't it?
It's a great approach, yeah.
Yeah. So you've educated me greatly in the last 20, 25 minutes, Gary, and I know you are in fact an educator apart from a threat intelligence professional. How do you combine being an educator and a threat intel guy?
Well, as you know, I left academia at the end of August after 18 years running a cybercrime lab at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And I knew I couldn't leave the students behind. So my company, Darktower, for the last 8 years, we've been hiring students and giving them the same types of real world opportunities that we have given to my students who worked for me at UAB. But now we have this new initiative that we're calling the Scam Busters University Edition. And I've got a young man working for our nonprofit, Sam Mabry, is running this for me, and we're reaching out to schools all around the world. We've had 10 schools sign up so far, and the idea is to give their students the same opportunity I was giving to my students at UAB. And in particular, we're looking at these crypto investment scams. We're encouraging the students, and we have a leaderboard where they can compete with one another for who gets the most points. For identifying new crypto scam websites that we didn't know about already, but more importantly, joining those websites and identifying the crypto addresses to which they ask us to make payments, and then sharing those with intelligence agency with intelligence companies and also with law enforcement. So we've just had our 100th student join the Scam Busters initiative. And we believe it's going to continue to grow as we get more active participation. But these students, one that I was praising on my LinkedIn this week, he found a website, did his investigation, and uncovered that they'd received $4.9 million in fraud payments. And we were able to identify quite a bit about that scam and share that directly to law enforcement. But we also are praising the student who did that and his professor who built the program that he's working in. And we think that what I tell the students is many of us are intelligence consumers, but even while you're still a student, you can become an intelligence provider. And wouldn't it be great if when you graduate, you have a stellar reputation as being an intelligence provider because of your open source intelligence skills? And so we're hoping that the 50 students who work for me at Darktower and the 100 students who are now part of Scam Busters, that's how I'm trying to continue this tradition of we have to make sure that we're providing the next generation, right? And so by engaging these students and teaching them what I've learned and encouraging them to teach me. One of our students built a a agentic AI to go and log into a crypto scam, automatically identify the wallets and report them back out. Now we're hoping things like that, if we can start seeing those scale. One of our students harvested the wallets from 200 scam websites last weekend.
Very nice.
That used to be the work of 10 students for an entire week. And we have one student who's got a technique where he was able to get them from 200 websites in a single weekend. Now he's teaching the rest of the students in Scam Busters. How did he do that? And while it's a leaderboard and they're competing, they're also passionate about sharing with one another the things they've learned and sharing with me. I'm learning things that I'm going to go back and teach industry from what I've learned from my students that we've recruited. And they're not my students. We have great students from Purdue and Tampa and Tulsa, Samford University. In the UK, we've got Northumbria and Leicester School of Policing are coming in. And all of these different schools, UNC Charlotte will be joining shortly. All of these different schools are bringing a professor who cares about the problem and the students that they've recruited from their school. And we're just trying to make it grow and grow and grow.
That is amazing, Gary. I'm really inspired by your story today. And I would love to thank you for your time with us. I imagine we could talk for another 2 hours. And I'm sure you and I will, offline, not visible to the rest. So thank you so much for chatting with me today, Gary.
It's a pleasure. I'm so glad I got to bump into you at RSA and we started this relationship. And I love what you do for Threat Fabric. And I'm a big fan of your company as well. Thank you, Gary.
That means a lot. And likewise. So, dear viewers, this was another episode of Fusion Fireside. If you'd like to see more, go to www.threatfabric.com/Fusion Fireside. I was your host, Ewart Driehuis. Thank you for watching.